Los Angeles, winter 2013. Downtown is a grid of flickering signs, cracked sidewalks, and exhaust haze rising from the concrete canyons around Skid Row. At the corner of Main and 7th stands the Cecil Hotel, a 1920s structure that once promised luxury, but by the 2000s had become a cheap, transient lodging. Its facade is weary, neon letters half-lit, brass doors dulled by decades of touch. The building has hosted drifters, tourists, and the desperate. Police know it well. Into this setting arrives Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old student from Vancouver, Canada. She has taken a break from university to travel alone through the United States, documenting her trip on social media posts and a personal blog. Her writing shows wit and curiosity, but also moments of melancholy. She mentions struggling with bipolar disorder and occasional depression. Her family, protective and close-knit, keeps daily contact. They describe Elisa as bright, responsible, and adventurous, but easily overwhelmed by stress. On January 26th, she checks into the Cecil for 4 nights. The hotel's lower floors are used as inexpensive rooms for long-term tenants, while several upper floors operate under a hostel-style brand called Stay on Main, aimed at young travelers. Elisa is assigned a shared room, but after 2 days, she is moved to a private one because of what staff later describe as odd behavior that unsettled her roommates. The details remain vague. In the days that follow, she visits bookstores, local cafes, and cultural landmarks. Receipts and camera sightings confirm her routine. Typical tourist stops, nothing alarming. Each evening, she phones her parents in Vancouver. Then, on January 31st, the calls stop. No emails, no updates, no checkout. The hotel reports her missing the next morning. Los Angeles Police Department detectives begin a search. Officers canvass nearby blocks, check bus terminals and shelters, and interview hotel employees. Cadaver dogs sweep parts of the building but find nothing. There is no evidence of robbery or abduction. Her luggage, laptop, and wallet remain in the room. Investigators obtain hours of security footage from hallways and elevators. Most of it is routine: guests, cleaners, maintenance staff, until they reach a clip recorded shortly after midnight on February 1st. The video lasts just over 4 minutes. In it, Elisa enters the elevator wearing a red zip-up hoodie, black shorts and sandals. She presses several floor buttons in quick succession, steps back, and waits. The doors stay open. She peers out cautiously, then darts back as if hiding from someone. Moments later, she edges forward again, leaning half out of the elevator, looking left and right down the hall. Her movements become increasingly erratic, arms raised, hands twisting as if conducting an invisible conversation. Then she steps completely out of view. The elevator doors remain open for an uncomfortably long time before sliding shut. When police release the clip on February 13th, hoping for public leads, it explodes across the internet. The unusual timing of the doors, Elisa's gestures, and the absence of any visible pursuer create an instant viral mystery. Some viewers analyze the footage frame by frame, suggesting she is hiding from someone. Others speculate she is disoriented, hallucinating, or experiencing a mental health crisis. The clip's eerie silence and security camera grain make it haunting. Behind the scenes, the LAPD continues physical searches. The roof is checked briefly but considered secure. Its access door is locked and alarmed, and the hotel's 4 large water tanks are sealed with heavy metal lids. Helicopters circle the area, and nearby buildings are inspected with dogs. Still nothing. Days turn to weeks. The investigation stalls. overshadowed by internet speculation that ranges from foul play to supernatural influence. Hotel management fields complaints from guests about low water pressure and an odd taste from the taps. Maintenance workers flush the pipes, assuming sediment buildup. The building, with its century of grim stories, suicides, assaults, even serial killers who once stayed there, feeds the growing sense of dread. Detectives quietly begin reviewing the hotel's history, noting how many missing person reports have originated from the address. It is not evidence, but it colors perception. As February advances, pressure mounts. Flyers with Elisa's photograph line lampposts along Main Street. Her family arrives from Canada to assist in the search, visiting precincts and pleading for information. Reporters crowd the lobby, and amateur sleuths begin entering the hotel hoping for glimpses of the elevator. Every theory feels possible and none sufficient. Police prepare for a second, more exhaustive sweep of the building. One that will include the rooftop tanks that were dismissed before. For now, though, in this first act of the story, all that exists is the image of a young woman stepping into an elevator, pressing buttons, peering into an empty hallway, and vanishing into silence. The clip loops endlessly on screens around the world, a modern ghost story recorded in infrared black and white. When February 12, 2013, came and went without any word from Elisa Lam. No one panicked at first. Delays happen. Travelers miss buses, lose phones, get swept up in a city that never sleeps. But when another day passed, and then another, concern hardened into dread. Her parents, who had spoken to her daily since she left Vancouver, knew this wasn't like her. Detectives reopened their maps and began again from the beginning. The last confirmed location, the Cecil Hotel, 640 South Main Street. The building itself felt like a suspect. The Cecil was not just any hotel. Since its grand opening in 1927, it had been built for glamour, an ornate lobby with marble floors and stained glass, chandeliers that once glowed for Hollywood tourists and salesmen traveling Route 66. But the Great Depression arrived swiftly, swallowing the district around it. The neighborhood turned into what locals called Skid Row, and the hotel became a cheap refuge for transients, drifters, and the lost. Over the decades, the Cecil gathered stories the way old walls gather dust: suicides from upper windows, violent deaths behind locked doors. Two notorious serial killers, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and Jack Unterweger, had both stayed there, decades apart, each using the hotel as a base during their killing sprees. Even in its quietest years, police were summoned to the building more often than any other in the district. By the 2000s, the Cecil had been partly rebranded as Stay on Main, an attempt to wash away its reputation with new signage and fresh paint. But the bones of the place remained the same. Creaking elevators, labyrinthine corridors, the mingling of long-term residents and short-stay tourists who barely spoke to one another. The hotel was divided, not just by floors, but by worlds. Investigators began interviewing guests. Some remembered Elisa, friendly but shy, often carrying a notebook. A security guard recalled seeing her near the lobby late one evening, distracted, almost dazed. Maintenance workers reported nothing unusual. There were no witnesses who saw her leave the building. Detectives checked every surveillance camera. Most hallways had no coverage. The only clear footage remained the elevator video. Still, officers studied it frame by frame. Why didn't the doors close? Was someone pressing the door open button from outside the frame? Or was it simply a glitch, one of many in an aging system? speculation spread online like wildfire. Viewers uploaded slowed versions of the clip, applied filters, and insisted they could see reflections, proof, they claimed, that Elisa wasn't alone. Others theorized she was under the influence of drugs, though toxicology would later disprove that. Amateur detectives around the world began building timelines, cross-referencing her blog posts with Los Angeles crime maps. Meanwhile, inside the hotel, tension grew. Some guests complained to the front desk that the police presence was unnerving. Others requested to change rooms. The lobby, once merely shabby, now felt oppressive, like a mouth closed around its secrets. Detectives searched the building again. Basements, maintenance closets, roof access, even vacant rooms sealed for renovation. Every door required a key. Every stairwell smelled faintly of rust and bleach. The cadaver dogs alerted faintly on the rooftop, but nothing was found. The more investigators explored, the more they realized how complicated the building truly was. The Cecil's upper floors were a maze of locked maintenance areas, half-sealed air ducts, and emergency exits that led nowhere. The rooftop could be reached only through a locked alarm door, or by climbing the fire escape from the side of the building. Few people had reason to go there. Still, the dog's brief reaction on the roof unsettled them. The 4 large water tanks sat there, towering above the building, each sealed by a heavy lid. Their purpose was mundane, to provide water pressure to the rooms. But in the grey light of February, they looked ominous, isolated from everything else. Officers noted them, but moved on. There was no sign of tampering, no reason to suspect anything unusual. As days passed, public fascination deepened into obsession. The Cecil Hotel trended across news outlets, YouTube channels, and online forums. Journalists dredged up every old headline tied to the building: suicides, murders, disappearances. It was as though Elisa Lam's case had awakened the hotel's entire dark history, forcing it back into the spotlight. And yet, despite all the attention, she remained missing. By mid-February, the LAPD had nearly exhausted leads. Her phone signal was dead, her bank cards unused, her social media silent. Her parents waited in their hotel room, desperate for answers. Police considered expanding the search radius. But first, they would run one final sweep of the Cecil itself. Every floor, every room, every corner of that decaying monument to misfortune. They would soon discover that the answers had been inside the building all along. By the 3rd week of February, the Cecil Hotel was no longer just a building. It was a pressure cooker. Detectives, journalists, and internet theorists all circled it like moths drawn to the same dim light. The management cooperated, but exhaustion and unease were starting to crack through every floor. Guests whispered about seeing things at night. Shadows in the hallways. Water that ran black for a second before clearing. Detective Wallace Tennell, one of the lead investigators, ordered a full top-to-bottom search. It was routine by protocol but desperate in tone. The missing person case had stretched nearly 3 weeks, and statistically, time was not on their side. A small unit of officers, along with a maintenance crew and cadaver dogs, began the sweep at dawn on February 19th. 2013, they started from the basement and moved upward. Storage rooms, boiler areas, and maintenance tunnels were checked first. Nothing. Then came the residential floors. Long, narrow corridors lined with faded red carpet. Officers knocked on doors, questioned residents, inspected empty rooms. They listened for sounds that didn't belong. The drip of leaking pipes, the creak of a loose hinge, or worse, the silence that settles over places too long neglected. The hotel was old, and its bones groaned under every step. The search team was accompanied by Santiago Lopez, a maintenance worker who knew the building's infrastructure better than anyone. Lopez had already checked the rooftop water tanks weeks earlier, confirming that the lids were closed and the locks intact. But complaints about water pressure and discoloration had become more frequent. It was his job to investigate again. While the detectives continued through the lower floors, Lopez climbed the narrow metal staircase that led to the roof. The air was cool, the city haze pale against the morning light. The 4 water tanks loomed in front of him. Massive cylindrical containers elevated on metal beams. He heard the steady hum of the pumps and the faint slap of water inside. He climbed onto the platform and unscrewed one of the lids. What he saw stopped him cold. Inside, floating just below the surface, was the body of a young woman. He stumbled back, shouting for help. Within minutes, the rooftop filled with officers and hotel staff. The scene was cordoned off, photographs taken, procedures followed. The body was retrieved with difficulty. The tank was 8 feet tall, half full of water, and the opening narrow identification was immediate. The clothing matched. Dental records confirmed it soon after. The missing girl from Vancouver, Elisa Lam, had been found. News spread like lightning. The same networks that had obsessed over the elevator footage now filled with headlines. Body of missing tourist found in hotel water tank. The details were grisly, but investigators released them carefully. The public didn't need to know that hotel guests had been drinking and bathing in that same water for nearly 2 weeks. Detectives faced an even harder question. How had she gotten there? The rooftop door was locked and alarmed. None of the staff had reported the alarm being triggered. The water tank lids were heavy, difficult to lift from the outside, even harder to close from within. There was no ladder inside. Forensic technicians found no sign of struggle, no fingerprints suggesting another person's involvement. Yet the sheer logistics defied belief. To reach the roof, Elisa would have had to either find a staff key or climb the external fire escape, a dangerous ascent even in daylight. Once there, she would have had to remove the lid, climb inside, and somehow replace it or let it fall shut. It was possible, but barely. The autopsy would later report no evidence of trauma, no drugs or alcohol beyond trace levels of her prescribed medication, cause of death. Accidental drowning. But accidental seemed too small a word for the public imagination. The story consumed the media. Photographs of the hotel rooftop, aerial shots of the tanks, freeze frames of the elevator footage. Every image became a digital relic of something people couldn't understand. Online investigators refused to accept coincidence. Some pointed to inconsistencies in the police timeline. Others noticed a strange similarity between Elisa's death and a plot from a 2005 horror film, Inside the Cecil. Guests checked out in waves. Those who stayed spoke of sleepless nights and an air of suffocating dread. Hotel staff, used to tragedy, still avoided the rooftop afterward. It was as though the building itself had exhaled and gone still. For the detectives, however, the work wasn't over. The case was technically solved, but not satisfied. Too many questions remained unanswered. How she reached the tank, why she behaved so erratically, and why none of the alarms had sounded. In the quiet that followed, as the rooftop was sealed off and the media trucks left, one truth became impossible to ignore. The Cecil Hotel had once again claimed another story for its growing archive of tragedy. The rooftop was silent once the cameras left. Police tape fluttered in the cold wind, and technicians in white suits worked methodically around the tank where Elisa Lam had been found. The water had been drained, samples collected, and photographs taken from every angle. To the investigators, this was now a crime scene, whether a crime had occurred or not. The tank stood roughly 8 feet high, with a small metal hatch just wide enough for a person to fit through. Around it, the concrete surface bore faint marks, scuffs, shoe prints blurred by weeks of weather. The path leading to the water tower was narrow and treacherous. Detectives tried to reconstruct her final movements. Could she have climbed the fire escape in the dark, stepped across the platform, and opened the heavy lid alone? It was possible, but everything about it was improbable. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office received the body for examination the following day. Internally, there were no signs of trauma, no bruising consistent with assault, no fractures, no defensive wounds. Toxicology tests showed no traces of narcotics or alcohol. Only minimal levels of her prescribed medication, an antidepressant and a mood stabilizer were present, though inconsistently. The report concluded, cause of death, accidental drowning, manner of death, undetermined. Undetermined. That single word would haunt the case more than any other. Investigators considered the simplest possibility, that Elisa had experienced a mental health crisis. Her blog and past records indicated she had bipolar disorder and a history of depressive episodes. She had also mentioned hallucinations in previous online posts. Maybe, the theory went, she had wandered onto the roof in a state of confusion or delusion, entered the tank voluntarily and could not escape. But that answer, though medically plausible, didn't satisfy the public or even some of the detectives. They couldn't reconcile her behavior in the elevator video with a random episode. And even if she had climbed into the tank, how had the lid been found closed again? No one could explain that without bending the laws of probability. For days, forensic teams re-examined every piece of evidence. Hotel key logs, security footage, staff interviews. No signs of forced entry were ever found. The rooftop alarm system, when tested, worked perfectly. If she had opened that door, it should have sounded. Yet no one heard it that night. The public reaction grew increasingly feverish. Internet forums filled with diagrams of the hotel, photos of the tanks, and theories that ranged from rational to outlandish. Some argued she had been murdered and the scene staged. Others believed she was part of a cover-up involving the hotel itself. More sensational corners of the internet whispered about the paranormal, that the building's grim history had somehow taken her. The hotel's reputation, already infamous, plunged even lower. Guests were horrified to learn that the building's drinking water and showers had been sourced from the same tanks. Complaints of foul taste and discoloration suddenly took on a horrifying clarity. Management issued public apologies and drained the entire system. Meanwhile, Elisa's family, devastated, returned to Canada with her remains. They issued no statements beyond requesting privacy. To them, the theories didn't matter. Only the loss did. But the world refused to let go. The elevator footage continued circulating online, reaching millions of views. Amateur investigators obsessed over every frame, timing her button presses, mapping the order of floors, speculating about invisible pursuers. Some said the elevator's doors failed because of a maintenance fault. Others insisted they were being held open by a presence just outside the camera's view. Police, overwhelmed by attention, formally closed the case in June 2013. Their final report reaffirmed accidental drowning, likely linked to a manic episode. No evidence of homicide, no evidence of third-party involvement. Case closed. And yet, Closure never came. The Cecil Hotel eventually rebranded again, trying to bury its association with the tragedy. The rooftop tanks were sealed permanently, but the story persisted. The building's shadow grew longer online, every unsolved detail, every eerie coincidence fueling new speculation. Years later, documentaries and podcasts would revisit it, interviewing detectives, psychologists, and paranormal experts, each arriving at the same dead end. No matter how many times the facts were repeated, the same haunting image always remained. A young woman standing in an elevator, the doors refusing to close, moving her hands in gestures no one could explain. The physical case might have ended on the rooftop, but the mystery of why began there. The discovery of Elisa Lam's body should have ended the story, but instead, it became the beginning of 1,000 others. In the months following the official case closure, the internet fractured into factions. Some sought rational explanations, others searched for meaning in the shadows. To many, the contradictions were too strange to accept. A locked rooftop, an alarm that never sounded, a young woman who vanished from sealed hallways only to be found in a tank of water no one could reach. On forums and YouTube channels, theories bloomed like urban myths. One camp focused on psychology, arguing Elisa's erratic behavior and inconsistent medication pointed to a manic episode triggered by isolation and travel stress. To them, every motion in the elevator video reflected confusion, paranoia, or a dissociative state. They cited her online blog entries, where she wrote openly about mental illness, her fears, her loneliness, her constant search for balance. It was tragic, but explainable. The second camp believed there was more. They dissected timestamps, questioned police statements, and highlighted inconsistencies in the autopsy report. Some claimed the footage had been edited, that key seconds were missing, that the elevator's time code jumped unnaturally. Others argued she had been murdered, possibly by a hotel resident, and that the tank had been used to hide her body. Police denied it, but the public's faith in the investigation was already fractured. Then there were those drawn to the Cecil Hotel's darker history. The building had long carried a reputation that bordered on myth. Between the 1930s and the 1960s, dozens of suicides occurred there. In the 1980s, Richard Ramirez, the infamous Night Stalker, had lived on the 14th floor during his killing spree. Austrian murderer Jack Unterweger followed years later, choosing the same hotel, perhaps knowingly. To the public, Elisa's death was not coincidence, it was continuity. The Cecil seemed cursed, a gravitational center for despair. Even stranger coincidences began surfacing. The 2005 horror film Dark Water, about a girl found dead in a rooftop tank of a decrepit apartment building, shared eerie parallels with Elisa's story. Some claimed the resemblance was too exact to ignore. Rationalists dismissed it as coincidence. Conspiracy theorists called it prophecy. Documentaries followed. Each one promised answers, but all circled the same uncertainties experts in psychiatry, criminology, and engineering spoke. Yet every explanation felt partial. Theories explained fragments, but never the whole. The case sat uneasily between logic and the uncanny, too bizarre to fit cleanly into either. For those who visited the Cecil afterward, the building felt unchanged, but different. The lobby's marble floors remained cracked, the air stale and heavy. The elevator, now infamous, operated as always, slow, unreliable, humming with the sound of ancient cables. Guests reported strange dreams, sleepless nights, the sense of being watched. Perhaps it was imagination, or perhaps stories, once spoken often enough, leave echoes. Years later, when Netflix released its documentary Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, millions revisited the story. Some found closure, others found more questions. Elisa's family declined interviews, preferring privacy. They asked that she be remembered not as a mystery, but as a person, an intelligent young woman who loved books, travel, and connection, whose life was cut short far from home. Still, the image endures. That 4-minute video remains one of the most viewed and discussed pieces of real-life footage in internet history. It became a mirror for every viewer's belief, a tale of mental illness, or of crime, or of the supernatural. The truth, perhaps, lies somewhere between all three, or in none of them at all. Today, the Cecil Hotel stands under a new name, partially renovated, partially abandoned, but its shadow remains. Tourists still gather outside, phones raised, whispering about the girl who rode the elevator that never closed. Some say the case teaches us about the fragility of the human mind. Others say it shows how darkness lingers in places touched by too much sorrow. But for most, it's simply a reminder of how mystery survives, how one story can slip between fact and fear until it becomes legend. Elisa Lam's final moments were recorded, analyzed and shared across the world. Yet the silence that followed speaks louder than the footage ever could. Was it truth, madness, or a curse that belonged not to her, but to the building itself? No one can say for certain, and perhaps that's why the story still haunts us.